Sony are a global entertainment powerhouse. They've got a $10 billion business in Sony Pictures, a $15 billion business in Sony Music, a $20 billion business in Sony PlayStation. Sport is that one entertainment genre where we haven't got that huge business. And as you see the sort of festivalization of sport and all these different entertainment genres converge, ultimately we've got an incredible opportunity of leveraging some of those gamification capabilities at PlayStation, leveraging some of the IP and music and pictures and creating something really differentiated in the world of sport as sport faces what I think is the biggest inflection point that we're going to see in our lifetimes. We can make things more accurate. Before VAR, 82% of all decisions were correct. After VAR, 96% of all decisions were correct. You were previously, before VAR, getting 1 in 5 decisions wrong. Now you're getting 1 in 25 decisions wrong. That's huge change. But ultimately, what negative impact is it having on the speed of the game or on the entertainment?
Hello, Business of Sport pals. I know you just want to get on with the show, but there is an exciting announcement to make, and that is that we have just launched our Patreon. This is the chance to get you more involved in the show, in helping us choose our guests, ask some of the questions, get involved in the quickfire round. We want to give you the chance to win some really cool stash, go to some great events. Everything that you think you can't get access to right now, you're going to have in the Patreon, on top of some bonus content from me in an extra time format, revealing what it's really like when we go behind the camera with our guests. So make sure you drop in and see what the Patreon is all about. Now, that is enough from me. Time to get on with the show. Rufus, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Business of Sport.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
It's really, really great to have you in the studio. We're going to touch on some things today that we haven't actually in previous shows, beyond VAR and Live, of course. But what it would be brilliant to start on is tell us a little bit about where you're at right now, what the job of CEO of Sony Sports actually entails.
Yep, so I'm the CEO of Sony Sports. We've got 4 businesses. We've got Hawkeye, Pulse Live, Beyond Sports and Kinatrax. We bought 2 of those companies relatively recently. And we're incredibly fortunate. We work with 23 of the top 25 sports leagues, and we're all about collecting world-class data at sports events and then helping the world's top sports leagues unlock the power of that. And whether that's for betting, for media, for officiating, for fan engagement, for performance purposes, we really try and partner with those rights holders to really try and add value.
This is Sony's sports division, is that correct?
Absolutely. So Sony are a global entertainment powerhouse. They've got a $10 billion business in Sony Pictures, a $15 billion business in Sony Music, a $20 billion business in Sony PlayStation. Sport is that one entertainment genre where at the moment we're actually subscale. We haven't got that huge business. And as you see the sort of festivalization of sport and all these different entertainment genres converge, ultimately we've got an incredible opportunity within the sports space of leveraging some of those gamification capabilities at PlayStation, leveraging some of the IP and music and pictures and creating something really differentiated in the world of sport as sport faces what I think is the biggest inflection point that we're going to see in our lifetimes.
What is that inflection point?
The inflection point is how fans are going to engage with sports content and how the business model is going to evolve. So I think the inflection point has started in terms of content consumption. I don't think we've started on the business model evolution yet, but I fundamentally believe that over the next 5 years or so, we are going to see an incredible shift to make sports content consumption more immersive and more participative and much less passive and lean back. And I think there's a whole range of tools that exist out there in the world, the landscape, the technology industry, and that's going to enable rights holders, leagues, teams, athletes to get much closer to the fan over the next few years or so. And so I think that is going to be a fundamental shift in terms of how fans engage with sports content. And I think that will really help younger demographics engage with sports content. I mean, there's so many figures bandied about these days. If you're under the age of 20, there's a 10% less chance you're going to be an avid sports fan. Ultimately, I don't think there's anything structural behind that. I think that's just a cyclical thing. We as a sports industry haven't done a good enough job about creating content in the way that younger fans want to engage with content. And I think that is going to have a transformative impact on the sports industry over the next 5 years. And then I think the business model will evolve. And the business model will evolve from being B2B businesses that have been propped up by media and sponsorship to more like an FMCG company who understand the customer and then drive ARPU, the revenue per customer, on an ongoing basis through that authentic, direct, personalized, customized interaction.
You mentioned the sports industry hasn't done a good enough job in doing this. Whose responsibility do you think it is to be elevating this? Is it the rights holders, the IP owners / creators? Is it their responsibility to be speaking to their fans in a different way? Because I'll also highlight, sport, we put it in this bracket, it's so different.
Yeah.
Right? Cricket is not football, is not golf, is not paddle.
Yep, absolutely. I think it does boil down to it should be the IP holder who takes on this responsibility. And so I think about one of my previous roles. I was the chief operating officer at the PGA European Tour and Ryder Cup for a while. We always used to say it's not our responsibility to put the golf club in the hands of the young child, because ultimately we're there to serve 250 professional golf members and to make sure that they get more playing opportunities and that they're playing for more money each week. And so actually we disaggregate that from trying to drive youth participation and all the stuff around that. I think that is, on reflection, having left that role, totally the wrong way of thinking about it. I think if you're operating at the pinnacle of the game, you should control that whole ecosystem. And actually, I think as we start to evolve and you want to try and diversify your revenue streams so you get D2C revenues as well as B2B revenues, I think you have to be looking to drive the whole agenda from tier 1 to tier 2 all the way down to the amateur sport. I also think there's a really symbiotic relationship between participation and consumption as well. Like if you want to create an active ecosystem around sport, which I think is one of the things that sports want to do, I think you need to have the ability as an IP holder, as a league, not only to see how your fans are consuming your sport, but see how your fans are playing your sport. Then you can create so many more products to them to create that engaged ecosystem around your sport.
How much of your job when you have these relationships within Sony then, and the conversations at the beginning of a relationship with a major rights holder, how much is that relationship about educating and making them understand how they can maybe leverage new opportunities, new technologies to improve the products that they create?
So our biggest business within Sony Sports is Hawkeye. And Hawkeye is in that privileged position of working with pretty much every global sports league. The only two that we don't work with are F1 and Russian ice hockey.
Sorry.
Slightly weirdly off beat, but they're actually surprisingly big, Russian ice hockey.
They have to be in that category, don't they? They're in the 25 then.
Absolutely. And actually we've just started doing some work with Aston Martin, so we're hoping to get into F1 soon. But the opportunity for us is we've got really deep established and trusted relationships. So, for example, our relationship with FIFA, going back to 2010 when they had the Lampard no goal in the England-Germany game, I can see you still
creasing,
harbour resentment around that.
Do you know what? Resentment just sat like not. I despair.
Yeah. It was
such an important stage. I mean, look, we probably hammered that game anyway. I remember it, and it was ugly, but it was. You felt cheated, didn't you?
You can still dream, can't you? And that felt like it was potentially the momentum was swinging our way. But so after that, we actually, and this is long before my time, but we started to work with FIFA on a long-term program for how can we start to collect data and introduce officiating introductions that can potentially help increase the accuracy of the game. And so we've been on a long-term journey with FIFA. In 2014, we introduced goal line technology with FIFA at the FIFA World Cup. In 2018, we introduced alongside FIFA VAR for the first time at the World Cup. In 2022, we introduced semi-automated offside. In 26, we're looking to introduce both automated offside and potentially some other automated things within the officiating space. So we've got these deep and trusted relationships with some of the world's top sports leagues. And I think that gives us a real power to be able to influence some of those conversations, because they know that we've been in sport for the last 10, 20 years trying to make the game better and try to improve the on-field product. We're not just in there as some mercenaries trying to drive commercialization, not that that's a bad thing or anything like that, but we've actually been in there trying to improve the spirit of the game. Now, I'm sure we can have a discussion around VAR, whether that helps improve the game or doesn't. But ultimately, we've got those long-term trusted relationships. I think that then gives you an incredible platform to be able to help drive change on other angles of the business, as well as the footballing on the pitch side of things, but actually on whether it's the commercial agenda, whether it's the type of content, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, we might as well. You've touched on it, and you've mentioned Hawkeye, and people have been very familiar with Hawkeye over the last 20 years from the different formats that it's taken in the sports, and it has improved in many. And it improves football. It improves the accuracy of football. If we're looking at some of the, I was talking about this earlier with someone, and I think it's really true. Sport. Integrity sits at the heart of it. Part of integrity is your trust in the product you're getting, delivering accuracy and fair results and everything that comes with that. There's a massive issue, as you've highlighted, and as we were just talking about before, around balancing that and the entertainment. But let's really just look at it from the reasons why it's implemented and for the benefit that it does bring the game. When you're at the heart of those conversations, when you're in the organization running that technology, where do those conversations begin? How do you really begin that introductory phase of technology, changing something people are so used to and trying to make it work?
It's a really good question. And I think actually FIFA are an exemplar of how you can do it. I think you have to take a really long-term view of these things because obviously fans are incredibly passionate about their sport. There is a huge inertia to change and a huge resistance to change. And particularly with something like technology, if you do something which is either not fully thought through or isn't phased and fully tested, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And then if something goes wrong, technology is held at a much higher bar than people. And so, like, if I look at the FIFA example, they operate on a 4-year cycle. So they'll effectively, after the World Cup in Qatar in 22, they will then work out what is their roadmap for 26, and they will embark along a 4-year schedule to build the technology with us. And we've got a joint venture, the Football Technology Centre, where we work together building some of that technology. We second in some of our staff, FIFA second in some of their staff. We'll have that at numerous test events. So for example, we're running automated offside at the Club World Cup this summer. We do it at the under-17s. We'll do it at the Futsal World Cups. We'll do it at certain women's events that are operated by FIFA. They're also doing it in a test environment in the Saudi Pro League as well. And so you get the mileage in to iron out any technical issues. And then one of the things that is incredibly, incredibly important is you then think about what the sell is of it and how you actually start to portray and position it to the viewer and the fan at home. And so one of the things that we spent an incredible amount of time on before the 22 World Cup was semi-automated offside, what the visualization is. And so I think many people don't like about VAR is you've got the crosshairs and it's extremely ugly and it's actually quite hard to see who is offside or not. And so what we built alongside FIFA for the 22 World Cup, and we use now in semi-automated offside in UEFA competitions or with many other leagues, is we built this wall. And so through the wall, you can see which part of the defender or which part of the attacker is sticking through.
I love it.
So it actually is much easier for the fan to see and visualize that a player was offside. Okay, and actually that is our learnings from whether it's tennis or whether it's from cricket. Actually, if you visualize something in a virtual world, it's so much easier to have a really clear view that you can then communicate with the fan. And we're working on these officiating introductions to try and change the game in the US a lot at the moment. And this is actually one of the big things that they rely upon us for. So we're working with the NFL at the moment who want to get rid of the chains to see whether it's a first down or not. And so we're effectively automating that line to gain. Have they got that first down? Have they got the 10 yards? And because actually, if you stretch the chains out, the chains that are on the side of an NFL pitch, sometimes there might be 9.7 yards, sometimes there might be 10.3 yards because of the kinks in the chains. And so actually, we're automating that. But actually, it's the visualization of that really brings it to life for the fans. We're doing something similar with the NBA where Adam Silver's really frustrated about how long it takes the fourth quarter in terms of time. What's to make the game quicker? So we're looking to automate it, goaltending reviews and ball out of bounds. We're doing a similar with MLB, who want to introduce a similar to cricket system called automated balls and strikes. So effectively, each team within the MLB gets some challenges. If it's called a strike or whether it's called a ball, they can challenge that based on their review. So there's so much stuff that is going on in this industry at the moment in terms of trying to use technology to make sport fairer, safer, better. We're really privileged to be at the vanguard of that. But to your point, you always have to then come back and almost give it the does it pass the sniff test of the fan? Like, yes, we can make things more accurate. I think the Premier League, Tony Scholes, the chief football officer at the Premier League, did some analysis of before VAR, 82% of all decisions were correct. After VAR, 96% of all decisions were correct. So that's a huge change. You were previously, before VAR, getting 1 in 5 decisions wrong. Now you're getting 1 in 25 decisions wrong. That's a huge change. But ultimately, what negative impact is it having on the speed of the game or on the entertainment? And that's always the debate that I think you need to get into. But I think we're getting more mature around that, and we're starting to try and automate more of that.
But you are, because you're constantly changing. The benefit of technology in a product is that it's in a state of evolution. Something like semi-automated offside. So the question straight away that came to mind was, every time I've seen it in the Champions League, it seems to work better than our lines in the Premier League. So why do we not implement it in the Premier League? Why does that not happen when the technology appears better? Maybe because you'll say it's not actually better. There's still an evolution phase. We seem sometimes slow to adopt these changes in the top leagues, when actually, if they were implemented, some of those changes could be made a little quicker than they are.
It's a good question. And a lot of that comes down to the leagues and how they feel it will impact their product. So, for example, Serie A are always really early adopters of the technology. They've been using semi-automated offside now for 3 years. La Liga have been using it for 2 years. Saudi Pro League have been using it for 2 years. UEFA have been using it for a couple of years. We've obviously been impressing upon the Premier League, who we work with VAR and goal line technology, and we provide them with refcoms, and we build the Premier League website and app through our Pulse Live business, that actually this is the way to go. I think they've just got a position, and they have actually now introduced it. Actually, I don't know if you've seen over the last couple of weeks or so, they've introduced semi-automated offside. But for them, I think it was just, they wanted to make sure that the technology was at a level which they thought was commensurate with their product on the pitch.
Okay. And I mean, do you think when that happens, how do you, I guess, influence that decision when it comes down to giving those assurances? Because there's a lot of pressure on you as the technology provider to ensure that the product that you're working with them on is doing this, because this is a product ultimately that means a lot to a lot of people, and entertainment still sits at the heart of it.
Absolutely. And we take that responsibility incredibly seriously, because it is a huge position of responsibility, particularly when you move away from review and you start to automate. Because when you automate, there's no backup. Like if you think about our evolution in tennis, previously Hawkeye was used as a challenge system. So Nadal doesn't like a decision, he gets to challenge it. You get the slow hand clap at All England Lawn Tennis Club, and then you see whether the ball was in or out. Actually, for the first time, next championships this year, they're introducing electronic live calling. So there's not going to be any line call judges there. You've just got the umpire, and then you've got our technology, which is saying whether the ball's in or out. Like, there is no room to hide there because you don't have any backup. It's the same within goal line technology within football. That is actually a really good example of where a technology has been introduced. And I think most people would agree that is value creating. Like, that is fully automated. The ball either is over the line or it's not, and you don't get a stop in the game. It goes straight to the ref's watch and it says goal or no goal.
Okay, so this is my point, and that's a great point. Yeah. When we talk about technology, we love objective, not subjective. My issues with VAR, as I think a lot of football fans are, and I caution it because every time you say you have an issue with VAR, it's not necessarily the technology, it's the implementation of a technology, which is the problem. But the challenge you have there is that there's a lot of decisions which still require a subjective opinion. It is still opinion by someone, just not necessarily the referee to get to that point. Goal line technology, very simple, in or out. Tennis, same. But penalty... Still a level of subjectivity. Clear and obvious error. Well, who's deciding the clear and obvious error? Not a piece of technology that has an algorithm to say yes or no, a person sitting in a studio, basically. How much of your job is to help with that implementation of technology to ensure that what you've created is then used as you've designed it?
Yeah. So it's a high percentage of what we do. And that's why we have sort of so many staff. Like, we are a managed service. And so we will probably have between 2 and 4 people at every global sports event operating our technology. And so when you pan to the VAR room at Stockley Park for the review, you will see the VAR, you'll see the AVAR, and then you'll have our operator sitting next to them, playing with the buttons and trying to either draw the crosshairs or show them the right images. And so it is very much about partnering. And I think that goes back to the point we were saying earlier about it has to be long-term partnerships with some of this stuff. Like, it's very hard to go in as a sort of tech supplier and just drop your technology down and then run away, because ultimately we're behind that technology. Our name is on that. We have something within Hawkeye we call the Hawkeye guarantee, that we want to ensure that we're operating as well off the pitch as the players are on the pitch. And so we take that incredibly seriously.
What's the hardest thing, decision-wise, from a decision review system on the technology? I said goal line technology is easy. Is it something like a penalty? Is it something where that does still require a human subjective opinion?
So the hardest stuff that we're doing at the moment, so soccer is something that we've done for a while in terms of semi-automated offside. As I said, we're moving to fully automated offside.
And sorry, can I actually, just to jump in, the difference is between the two, just so people are really clear.
Yeah, so let me maybe just take a step back and sort of talk about how it works. So we effectively have 10 of our cameras that are on both ends of the goal for goal line technology in pretty much every global soccer stadium. And then we have 14 of our cameras that are capturing at 50 frames per second, 29 skeletal points on every athlete in real time. So no wearables, purely through optical tracking. So we are tracking those players' form and their biomechanical movements for the whole of the 90 minutes. That is what enables us to do semi-automated offside, because we know when the kick point happens and we know where all the limbs of the players are. And so because at the moment there is always with these things, they are improving and they're getting more accurate. What we've done at the moment for semi-automated offside is effectively that automatic trigger happens when a player is either offside or not offside, and then it gets sent to the VAR, and the VAR either puts his thumb up or puts his thumb down. As we get more comfortable with the implementation of the technology, and FIFA and UEFA and Serie A and EPL do, then we will look to fully automate it. So then it almost becomes like goal line technology is. So rather than, when you've got an offside, rather than actually needing to go to a VAR check, it can go straight to the ref's watch, and then the ref can say it's offside or not offside. And so this is why I really talk about this evolution of no sort of technology, video review, and then automating. Like, automating is hopefully is the best of both worlds in that sort of spectrum that you were talking about, because it hopefully gives you accuracy, but it also gives you speed and allows the entertainment to continue. And then you don't get the disappointed faces after someone's waited 5 minutes for a review. And again, you have to have this trade-off of is the right decision worth a 3-minute delay? But then it also, like, there is obviously a lot of negative conjecture around VAR. But Wolves obviously brought the debate to the Premier League clubs a year ago, and the Premier League clubs voted 19 out of 20 to continue with VAR. So I think people want to talk about the game. I grew up as a young lad going to watch Dover Athletic in the Beezer Homes League. So the Beezer Homes League was like 1 or 2 below the old Vauxhall Conference. And me and my dad used to spend all of the time back talking about the referee and how the goal should have been. And like, you're always going to want to have talking points around football, right?
if we lost it, we complain. If we have it, we complain.
Exactly. So I think there is something to that of it creates talking points around the game. It increases accuracy. There's also some softer factors that I think we forget with particularly with VAR. One is you don't see the career-ending tackles that you maybe had 5 years ago. Like they've come out of the game because of it. You don't see the feigning and the diving, the Klinsmans of 10, 15 years ago used to have. So the game, I truly believe that as these products all mature within every sport, it will help on both sides of the ledger. It will help make it more accurate, and it'll help make it quicker and more entertaining.
So then we talk about the fan experience and the pressure on that. It's different in different sports, right? You talked about tennis. When we have it in cricket, rugby, TMOs, generally the consistency across those is that the fans can interact when the technological decision is part of the game. In football, for obvious reasons, we don't need to go into it. You show too much of that in some stadia, and it can create some issues. Is there a way to introduce it to football? If there was a pure reliance on technology, do you think it becomes easier to show something in football? Because there isn't necessarily the target for blame. A fan can't go and try and tear down a decision made on a very accurate piece of technology, but it can, someone sitting in Stockley Park making another subjective decision outside of the referee's control.
I think that helps, that there is a level of objectivity. I think it also is, as we talked about previously, really important how you display that. And I actually think Premier League and I know FIFA and UEFA have been behind this as well. It's great that they've started to trial these announcing what's going on to the fans, whether that's through the refs being mic'd up like they do in the NFL, whether that's through having the images or the replays on the screen. I think one of the things, and again, people within football have been very vocal on this historically. One of the things that football hasn't done particularly well is maybe sell the fan experience of that officiating decision, particularly in stadia, but also on the screen. And I think there's more that you can do to make the fans feel part of that decision journey. And I am in no way, and just for the record, I'm in no way saying that we should be comfortable with having 3 to 5 minute delays around the game. Like, that's not great. Like, the athletes are finely tuned thoroughbreds. Like, these guys shouldn't be waiting in the cold for 5 minutes. And so we need to be quicker. We need to automate what we can automate. We need to display that well. But when done well, I think it's really, really value enhancing. Do we maybe rugby? Talked about rugby. We do the TMO technology in rugby. Can you go back maybe too many phases? Are they checking the wrong things potentially in rugby? Do they overcheck it? Should you be using it to check scrums or something like that? Or should it just be for really definitive moments in the games and X phases back? So I think there are parameters we can put around it to make it more efficient in its usage. But I would hope that over time, it can be something that really helps the game.
Something like tennis, I've actually come to love the implementation of the challenge in a way, because it does. I never think it takes too much time out of it. And the odd occasion, maybe you wait for a long time, but in general, it's pretty quick. But I don't know, there's something I love about a line judge. There's something I love about the authenticity of that part of the sport, and the fact that you still have people behind each line whose sole job for a huge amount of the match is literally to be on there. And some of the calls they make are incredible. You're looking at it going at 140 miles an hour when Andy Roddick was pelting down a serve. How can you see that? To fully automate something like that, do you think we're in danger sometimes of losing some elements of an industry which still make it incredibly special?
So we've had this debate a lot in tennis. So electronic line calling was really driven within COVID, where there was obviously restrictions around people, movement, personnel, etc. And the US Open were the early adopters with electronic line calling. Then the Aussie Open followed. All England, as I said, Wimbledon are doing it this year. ATP have mandated that all I think it's the Masters and Thousands are going to use electronic line calling from next year. WTA are looking at the process. So I think it's the direction of travel from an accuracy perspective, but also from an efficiency of event operations perspective. Do you potentially lose something to the dressing of the court? I think it depends where you are. I mean, if you look at the US Open, the court looks so clean without any line judges on there. But then you think about Wimbledon and you think about all of the line judges there wearing their Ralph Lauren gear, which is obviously
Ralph Lauren,
a nice sponsible asset. Yeah. And like, you have to think about those trade-offs. But ultimately, it's the right debate to have, right? Yeah. And that's not necessarily why you asked the question earlier, why are all organisations not bringing this in at the same point? People bring it in at the right speed based on their commercial programme and how they think it's had value. We're speaking at the moment Roland Garros. Now, ball tracking on clay, there is another dimension. I don't know if you saw the Zverev incident recently in the Madrid Open. We're very confident in that call, but that is actually
on record.
It's a very interesting point that actually where and ATP did a really good educational video around this, where the ball bounces on clay isn't like the print that's left isn't necessarily where the ball necessarily hit because of the compound of clay and how much clay is on the court. And so there's lots of different variables that can upset that. And obviously you don't want in a final at Roland Garros having an incident like that where it looked on the TV pictures that actually it was out and it was called in. So this is why the pace of adoption has to be really sensitive to what makes that slam or that event special. And it has to be really sensitive to why the fans love that sport so much.
But before we continue with the show, we want to take an opportunity to thank our sponsor for the show, Revolut Business, the account designed to add efficiency to your business finances. Now, every business hits those big turning points when efficiency is the difference between make or break. Revolut Business makes your finances efficient, helping you manage team expenses, control spend, and expand into new markets, bringing everything you need into one place. Now, we heard on a recent show how Revolut have partnered with Manchester City Women to create cutting-edge partnerships, and I'm delighted to say they haven't stopped there. We've teamed up with them to offer a special offer for our listeners and viewers. And if you're new to Revolut Business, you're in luck. Open a Revolut Business account today using the link in this episode's description, add money to your account, and get a £200 welcome bonus. Pay and get paid globally in over 30 currencies, automate your expenses, set custom card controls, and earn up to 3.51% annual interest paid daily, all on one platform. You'll be ready for whatever's next with this all-in-one account that's designed for efficiency and built for business. Click the link in this episode's description to sign up and get your £200 welcome bonus. This reward is only available until the 7th of July 2025, and T's and C's apply. Now, back to the show. Look, we could talk about the implementation of technology and officiating for so long, but I'm, there's so much more that you do and that you're involved in, particularly now with Sony's involvement in, should we say, elevating those fan experiences, creating unique concepts. And the one thing I really wanted to get into here, which, is amazing. It really took kind of me to a different dimension of how I saw the opportunities to consume sport, was some of the work you've done in the US with someone like the NFL, when you've leveraged the IP of different partners to create a different viewing proposition. Beyond Sports is now part of the Sony family. The particular reference that it'd be great if you could talk through, but I'm sure there's more, is the Toy Story IP being leveraged for the NFL and creating a product alongside that. Can you just tell us how you've been working to elevate that differentiation of fan experience with these major rights holders, with these big tech companies?
Yeah. So I think if you speak to any sports CEO, commissioner, the biggest issue they will talk about is how do we engage younger fans? And we talked about that at the top. Like, this is something where I think our industry needs to do better. And it's very interesting. Like, when we work with the US organizations around this, they're a lot more focused and enlightened around taking responsibility for unlocking and engaging younger fans, typically, and that's a big generalization, than they are over in Europe. And so we've started, and again, this leverages the data that we collect. And this is why we brought Beyond Sports into the family alongside Hawkeye. What Beyond Sports are able to do is they can effectively recreate the game based on all of the data points that you're collecting from the athlete in a virtual environment within a circa 1 second latency. So once you have that data in a virtual environment, you can recreate the games in any form of IP that you want. And then it almost just becomes like a computer game. You're not constrained by the producer who wants to show you a particular angle, because all of the data at the same latency as the main production is coming to you in a digital environment, and then you can start to do some really cool stuff with it. Like, we are just sort of touching the sides of what you can do. So what we've done so far is altcasts. So we did one with the NFL in December where we recreated one of the the Cowboys Jaguars game in Simpsons IP. We did the Toy Story one 12 months previous. We did something on Christmas Day with the NBA and Mickey Mouse IP. We've done pretty much weekly recreations this year with the NHL, who are really trying to make it more episodic.
And I'll just say for people, if we're allowed to on, I don't know, rights, but we'll put some of this in the video. If you're listening to it, you can check it out on the YouTube version because it is absolutely incredible to see.
Hard line, so Bart will throw. It's Lisa, puts her foot in the ground, leaves her dad in the dust, and says, "If anyone needs me, I'll be in the end zone." Touchdown!
So I just wanted to tell people that it will be there if they want to have a look.
And it's great because the NFL really get behind it, and then the broadcasters really get behind it as well. So we've partnered with ESPN primarily around the production so far, and they obviously part of the Disney Group. We can leverage some of their IP, but then you get like, I don't know, Bart Simpson throwing the touchdown. It was actually very interesting with the Toy Story stuff, which was the initial one we did with them. They wouldn't actually allow us to use any of the marquee IP like Woody because they were very worried if Woody got injured or he started a fight or something like that, it might not be good for the franchise or the next few versions of it, which was fascinating. The issues with live sport,
protection,
right?
Yeah,
exactly. So the most recent one that we did in December with the Simpsons IP for the Cowboys Jags game, it went live on Disney Plus and ESPN Plus. They had 5 million viewers. They had an average of 1 million viewers. They had the average age of it, the median age of it was 14 versus 56 on CBS or NBC. 62% of them had never watched an NFL game before. And interestingly for us, it skewed 52% female as well. So
really,
like the NFL were just they want to do more of it. And also the great thing about this business as well is so scalable because we're already collecting all of the data in the stadium anyway for officiating and betting and media purposes. So all of that skeletal data is getting collected. Then it's just really put in the games engine. It's so scalable. And so the constraint at the moment of having these different ways of engaging, of more immersive, engaging sports content in more personalized, different IP isn't around the supply of technology or the way to it. It's not even really around the demand. I think it's primarily around the rights cycles and some of the rights restrictions. And what we see this as is a new additive asset class that will sit somewhere in between audio visual rights and gaming rights that can potentially be commercialized and packaged up by rights holders in the future.
Because that's what I was going to ask. We have, as anyone who listens to the show regularly will know, a huge number of traditional rights holders, whether that's chief executives and owners of football clubs, rugby teams, cricket, you name it. Huge challenge right now is creating additional revenue, building on the business lines, leveraging new technologies to help create better business, ultimately. It's very easily said, much harder to implement. Doing this kind of work, how does that impact them? How does that affect their bottom line? How does that help them commercialize better?
Yeah. So I think initially what this should do is it should provide new content that is going out to a different audience than your core content. And once you have the content in this virtual environment, there are so many things that you can potentially do with it. As we talked about, you can start to choreograph the game yourself as the digital viewer. So you can watch the game from the player's point of view, from above, from below. You can scan round. So it becomes a different way of engaging with the content. You can then also, we've actually built this product, which we're calling, working title, Hawkeye at the moment, which is incredibly exciting.
Well played.
Thank you. We had to get AI in there somewhere. So we've been partnering with Cambridge University and Football Manager for the last 2 years. And so we're able now to simulate how a game is going to play out. So a lot of companies have built something where they can simulate the next play. We can simulate the next game, next season. And this is a really based on 20 years of historical data. And this is a really powerful AI tool. Not only are there applications, and we're working with City Football Group and others on this in terms of transfer scouting, but there's huge applications in terms of fan engagement as well. So for example, imagine you're doing your fantasy team for the week and you want to do a simulation of how one lineup will play versus another lineup. Imagine if you're watching the game and you've got the real life game going there, and then you've got this virtual game side by side. You can make a substitution. You might take off Trent Alexander-Arnold and bring on Robertson and play out your game side by side with the real life game. See if you can make tactical decisions better than Arne Slot. Like, the whole opportunity for us to dive into this virtual world with credible data that's based on the game itself and create new sports experiences that can engage younger fans, I think is powerful.
Can I ask you on that? It's a really good point. There's such a common narrative now that the new audience, the younger audience, their lack of interest in things is based on time, right? Things take too long. They want things quicker. They want things shorter. I have issues with that in some ways. I'm interested to see what you think, because to me, what you're actually saying here is if we find a better way of engaging than just putting a product in front and expecting them to watch, actually time's not an issue at all. We have to just create new ways to help them engage with some of this traditional content with some overlays on top to really elevate the experience.
100%. I couldn't agree with that more. Have you ever tried to get a phone off a 12-year-old? Like, it's impossible. Like, they are consuming huge amounts of content. It's not like they don't want to engage with sport. It's not like they're any less propensity to do that, either through participation or consumption, I don't believe. I think we just haven't given them the opportunities to do that. And ultimately, they want to engage, as we talked about, with the more immersive, gamified. They want to influence the content, but they also want to be stars. And so I think we want to make fans as stars. Like, you want to give them the opportunity to create their own content by using some of these tools, by sharing it with their friends, by creating Strava-like leaderboards. And so I think there's huge opportunities to do that. So another thing Beyond Sports did, actually, they're based out of Alkmaar in the Netherlands. They worked with the Eredivisie, and there was one team who had a player from Latin America, and they didn't have a distribution deal in Latin America. So they built this product called GameFace, which effectively enabled you to add your own character and then implement it on top of the game, and have him run around. And they had, like, every game they were getting 500,000 viewers of this on YouTube in Latin America. Like, I think the market is out there. The opportunity is out there. Like, how the commercial model manifests itself down the line as we start to move into this thing, I think it is a shift from B2B to D2C. I don't think we know exactly what that commercial model looks like, but you've got to create that currency of engagement and eyeballs first, and then you've got the opportunity, whether it's new sponsors, whether that's D2C, whether that's micro skins, whatever that economic model looks like. I think the opportunity is going to come.
How do you look at businesses that you think are additive to the Sony group? Then we talk about all the areas you're involved. A huge part of what you're doing is continuing to grow. M&A strategy, I'd imagine, is rife. You're always looking at new places. How do you evaluate some of those companies? We're an investment firm here. We always look at this, where to put investment. I'm asking any good tips, but also, in all seriousness, what is it that you actually take into account when seeing if it's the right fit for the broader company?
Yeah, I think the way that we think about it, and actually this is a piece of advice that Paul Hawkins, the Hawkeye founder, gave me a few years ago, and I still think about it, is you don't want to buy companies for scale. You want to buy companies that have the X factor. And if you look at what Hawkeye have done, I think it's probably fair to say they have had a revolutionary or transformative effect on sport. They introduced DRS in cricket, line calling in tennis, worked with FIFA for VAR and goal line technology and semi-automated offside. We're now introducing officiating innovations with all the major US sports leagues. That is pretty dramatic. When we look at what Beyond Sports are doing, we are with Beyond Sports trying to change how fans engage sports content, and they're having a real impact. We recently bought a business in the sports biomechanics space. They are really trying to change the world of trying to keep athletes on the field for longer, using skeletal data to try and reduce injuries and improve performance. Our fourth business is a digital agency called Pulse Life. They're really trying to use AI to give different fan experiences. So we're all about having people organizations who are not only symbiotic and synergistic with the companies we've got, but actually have that X factor and are able to do something different. And hopefully it's a cliched expression, but play to where the puck's going in the sports industry versus where it is today. So there's some of the things that we think about.
Through the relationships that you have and working with these existing companies that you have, does part of it, you see gaps as you're going through this. You go, oh, actually, do you know what? If we did a little bit more on this side of it, it could massively elevate our operations on a Hawkeye perspective, maybe.
I think so. And actually, one of the things I always do when I speak to senior people at our partners is say, are there any companies out there who you think we should be thinking about? And actually, that's where the Kinetrax acquisition came about. I was speaking to someone at MLB, the chief operating officer, Chris Marinak, and said, like, are there any companies out there that you think would be helpful to have as part of our relationship as we start to build? And he said, there's a brilliant company called Kinetrax. They're based out of Florida. They work with 22 of the MLB teams, and they take skeletal data and they're really driving value. And so I think that's a big source of where we can identify some of these gaps and some of these opportunities.
And it's all data integration analytics, right? I mean, this is what's so important now in sport. It's being able to create this environment where it's elevating again. It all seems to come back to us, either elevating some form of experiential or accuracy piece. But the more we can do within this space, the better the people supporting the rights holders in their mission to create great product, the better the product.
Absolutely. And this is where I think the Kinetrax, which is our sports biomechanics company, come in. And you can see how the economics work for that. So the average MLB team, their average wage bill each year is about 150 million. They at any one time would typically have 40 to 50 million on the injury list. And so that is a huge proportion of their 33% of their wage bill that they can't put out on the mound to start each game. And so actually, if you can start to make relatively marginal gains around some of that stuff, it can be quite transformative to try and improve the product. And increasingly in some of these media deals, particularly in the US, they're actually having to guarantee that the stars are on the pitch for that amount of time. And so we're speaking now with the NBA League office, and they're saying, how can you actually help us put some of these guarantees behind in terms of by having this proactive injury prevention tools?
Well, that's such an important point, right? I've had this conversation with a few people before, and they were talking about the same. It was the rights deals, the massive rights deals in the billions, are being influenced by the media companies going, well, hang on a sec, LeBron James only played in 2/3 of the games last season, and we buy into that a huge amount now based on the international value of a star, so we're going to pay you a third less.
Yeah. I mean,
doesn't that really elevate your influence? I mean, this is where you become so valuable because you can start influencing those top level revenue streams.
And that's what we're trying to do. And like there was the Moneyball, when was it? Early 2000s, maybe the Billy Bean Oakland days. And that was about using sports data to drive trading, transfers, scouting, performance. I actually think we're on the vanguard of a Moneyball 2.0 now, and it's going to be about using biomechanical data to influence the same trading, scouting, and performance.
Okay, can we just be really simple for people who may not know? Biomechanical data basically refers to...
So effectively, it's similar to the data that Hawkeye collect, but it's skeletal data. So the Kinetrax team can collect up to 50 parts on a player's body, but they collect that at 500 frames per second. So that is huge amounts of data. And what you then do is you've then got a really good view of the biomechanical profile and makeup of a player. And whether that's a pitcher, whether it's a batter, whether it's a fielder, but then you can start to see if they are susceptible to any potential injuries in the future because they are starting to change their typical biomechanical passport. And you can use it either in-game or retrospectively for load management to work out how long you want to keep them on the pitch for. But actually, I think the application of this at the moment is primarily within baseball. We're actually starting to do some stuff with the NBA now in terms of the form for three-pointers. We're actually doing some stuff with the NHL in terms of goaltender position. So I think there's a lot of applications of it. We're actually looking at potentially stride length in soccer to infer tiredness levels. So there's lots of ways that you can potentially use this biomechanical data to inform on-field decisions.
Do you notice a difference in how you work, the adoption of a lot of this with US leagues, major US organizations, and introducing it in, should we say, European or rest of the world environments?
Yeah, and I think this was something that I think we touched on before we started. It is very different. And having that single ecosystem of the sport and having everything under one governing body, one commissioner, I think makes it a lot easier for them to be strategic and think about actually really long-term having the best players playing in the best competition format and optimizing revenues and taking strategic bets over a long-term period. I think the problem that some of the European sports have, and I was in golf, very fragmented, tennis, very fragmented, football, incredibly fragmented, like rugby, the same. I think the model that the US have of that governance model and the ability to think strategically, invest long term, is really beneficial. And I suspect that we're going to see some of those global sports converge towards the US model over the next 5-10 years or so. I mean, we're starting to see it, right? With the LIV Golf, the PGA Tour, the European Tour, the conversation around ventures between WTA and ATP, football, the fight for the scarcity of top talent is only going to increase with the expansion of Club World Cup, Champions League, blah, blah, blah. So I think these things are going to start to come to a head, but I think it makes it, in our conversations, it makes it so much easier for those US organizations who control the full ecosystem to start to drive the more advanced content consumption and potentially business models.
We talk a lot here about all the work you do and how it influences the rights holder, the IP owner. What about what it does for the athlete? The power of the athlete now has never been stronger. The brand of an athlete is often, in many cases, hence why, as we were talking about the rights deals being influenced, as strong as some of the clubs that these organizations are part of. Tell me about any opportunities or ways in which some of the athletes are able to improve their leverage, create new opportunities for themselves, if they are, through some of the work that you guys do.
Yeah, I mean, we typically work with the leagues, and about 95% of our revenue today is from the leagues, and we're trying to work increasingly with the teams. We don't, at my current role, work particularly closely with the athletes. I suppose what you're getting is more value around skeletal and biomechanical, what the industry calls level 3 data, and that there is obviously lots of conversations happening at the moment around who has the ownership of that data. And over time, with players' organisations, I'm sure that there are increasingly opportunities for them to monetize that.
Well, I guess it's just when they go into, let's say they're part of Toy Story IP and NFL again, and suddenly there's a huge amount they can do here with an audience who'd never really spoken to them before. They're a part of a gaming or Disney IP or whatever it may be. They've got a new touch point. Can they do that independently, I guess, or is that still quite centralized in the relationships they have with their owners?
I think from what I've seen, it's more centralized. I think, but a good analogy that I could potentially draw is from again, when I was at the PGA European Tour and Ryder Cup, one of my roles there was Chief Content Officer, and one of the things we did back there in 2015, 2016 was really try and make the athletes stars, but drive more irreverent content types. And so what we wanted to do was to activate sponsors authentically. And so we did lots of things, like we did the Guinness World Records fastest hole in golf. We did how far can you hit a golf ball into a moving car, where we were effectively trying to show that Callaway balls run long and true, and BMW can accelerate from 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds, or whatever that is. But when we first started speaking to the athletes about that, the Rory McIlroys, the Justin Rhodes, the Tommy Fleetwoods, it was impossible for them to get them to give their time for the tour for no remuneration. Actually, after we started to do that 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and you started to see the numbers, particularly on social, which started to become really material, as individual contractors, they obviously wanted to be able to sell their patches for more money, and actually it became a key part of their armory when they were going into their individual personal endorsements discussions. So I think that the power of giving someone a camera and a platform is incredibly powerful and will continue to be powerful, particularly for those individual sports.
That's what I love. It's the indirect impact of what you're doing. Much of this we talk about is very on face value. It's what we can see in front of us. The impacts of it are extending well beyond the broadcast that's improving the technology that's improving for officiating?
We would hope so. I mean, one of the things we want to do is try and unlock the value of that data for all different parts of the ecosystem. So that's it. That's certainly the ambition.
Okay, go on. We've been dancing around it, but I'm desperate to have it. Let's talk golf.
Golf, yes.
Let's talk golf. What do you? I mean, we could do so much. I mean, you mentioned you were at the European Tour. Tell us a little bit about that. What was that organisation like? How was the sport when you were working with it? Because we hear so much about it now, right?
Yeah. So I had an incredible time. So I was really fortunate to be brought in by the chairman who came in 2014, David Williams. And I came in to do a strategy review, 2014-ish. With the big question being, should we throw our load in with the PGA Tour, or should we look to continue to effectively be an alternative tour? And I think I then went in-house and I think I did pretty much most C-level roles there. I was chief strategy officer, chief content officer, chief financial officer, chief marketing officer, chief operating officer over my 5 years. So the CEO at the time,
it's basically your organisation.
Well, no, it was very much Keith Pelly's organisation, the CEO. But he had this thing of there's 4 things that make a good executive: work ethic, attitude, intelligence, and distant fourth is subject matter expertise, which I think I agree with. And so he would sort of give people different challenges at different times. But it was a fascinating business to be part of. And I think that goes back to some of these governance models that we talk about. Like, you've got 250 members, and it's 1 vote per member. So Rory McIlroy has the same power as part of the governance than your 200 ranked member. Which made it really hard to actually evolve the product. I think everyone recognized at the time that the product needed evolving. Like there was, I think we did a study one year, 2015, 2016, there was over 250 72-hole stroke play tournaments in a year, like for professional men's golf. Like
that's individual tournaments. That's not days, right?
Exactly.
So basically, you just couldn't play.
Times 4.
Yeah.
So you couldn't play them all, and Sky or NBC or Canal Plus just couldn't air them all. There's too much, and you didn't have enough consumer clarity. Like, our organisation was called the European Tour, and over half our events were outside of mainland Europe, and you didn't have the top players playing against each other enough. Like, all of these disruptive tours that are trying to do, the whole premise is you just want the scarcity of the top players playing against each other more often, and ultimately it was way too distilled down. And so one of the things that we were really focused on is there a different model, a more disruptive model for golf that would enable us. I don't like using this analogy now. We used this analogy back in 2016 about replicating F1, but like having that 16, 18 events, because the players only play 22 events in the year plus the majors, where the top players can play against each other more often. And I don't know if you remember, actually, back in those days, there was still the World Golf Championships, which were the 4 events where players did tend to all turn up, and you used to get most of the top 50 for that. And so Keith and I actually went over, we spent time with Jay Monahan, we talked to him about it. But the problem with the golf model back in those days, in particular those days, you could still argue now, let's say the problem, but the thing was, it's got a brilliant commercial model around it. Like, PGA Tour just doubled their media rights deal with NBC and CBS in terms of revenue. And then they've got corporate America behind us. So every week they have a big title partner, a Nationwide, a Visa, a Sony turning up and paying them 10, 15 million for the privilege of having the naming rights for the event. And then they do loads of great charity work and stuff. So it was very hard for the PGA Tour to see why they should be disrupting this model that had been so lucrative and so successful.
And what was the European Tour? So alongside that, you mentioned the value in the US. The European Tour's business model in comparison, and therefore, I guess its relationship with the PGA Tour was...
Yeah, so the European Tour at the time was growing quite strongly. But one of the reasons that it was growing so strongly was because we had the trump card of the Ryder Cup in our portfolio. And so we could use that for leverage for sponsorship deals and particularly for media deals.
In what way? By bundling?
By bundling it together. And also trying to build narratives around the Ryder Cup that would help the European Tour events, i.e. this is the last tournament for qualification for the Ryder Cup, and having that season-long narrative towards the Ryder Cup.
And players participating in the Ryder Cup or wanting to participate in the Ryder Cup would have to perform an X number of European Tour events to be eligible?
Yes, I think it started off being 13, including the majors and the WGCs, World Golf Championships. Then it came down to 4 or 5, but the majors and WGCs were stripped out. Yeah. There's certain other regulations that used to exist. I don't know if it still do, where they had to play their National Open. So Henrik Stenson would have to pay the Swedish Open, etc. But ultimately, that gave some power in terms of ensuring that you had the top players a certain amount of times each year. And there was also some restrictions over captaincy with obviously the Henrik Stenson thing, which transpired in the end. But there was lots of good stuff that happened at the European Tour while I was there, and it was an incredibly exciting time. Like Keith Pelly, who was the CEO at the time, he's subsequently gone on to be the CEO of MLSE. We did some great stuff. So we had, alongside my European Tour role, I was also the managing director of European Tour Productions, which is the biggest producer of live golf worldwide. So we not only produced all of the European Tour events, which is no mean feat, going to Kenya, Philippines, Melbourne each week, doing full production. We had a team of about 80 to 200 people going around the world doing that. But we actually bought back, we believe you need to be in control of your own production. So we bought back IMG's 50% stake in both the production and the distribution business. And then we effectively ran that out of Wentworth, which was brilliant to do. We did the first data distribution deal actually with IMG Arena, where we employed 60 people. What we called was the world's best gap year, who came round and they would just stand on a golf course with a radar collecting XY coordinates of where the ball was, so you could have in-play betting. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but golf used to be the third most bet on sport in the UK.
Really?
Prior to in 1999.
Behind football and
horse racing.
Yeah.
It's now down at 16th because it hasn't had that advent of in-play betting. It's behind the tennises and all the US sports. And so one of the big things was, how can we provide more opportunities for people to engage with that as a way of increasing the engagement around the sport. So that was really cool. But then the big thing in the last year and a half was very much around, where are we going to continue standalone as the European Tour with the Ryder Cup golden goose behind us? Where are we going to sort of do a deal with the PGA Tour and work with them? Or where are we going to align ourselves with one of these disruptive bodies and really have a go at challenging the golf infrastructure?
What would it have meant to align with the PGA Tour?
So
centralised governing body in charge of all the...
Yeah, so ultimately that was sort of the way that the tours now, the European Tour, has evolved. So effectively there was a strategic alliance signed with the PGA Tour, whereby the PGA Tour actually took I think it was 30%, and it later went up to 50%, I believe, equity stake in European Tour Productions, the media vehicle which controlled all of the production and the media rights. And then the PGA Tour, there was some competition alignment. So the top X players from the European Tour, Order of Merit, got onto the PGA Tour next year. There was some, and then there was also some sort of financial underpin that the PGA Tour provided to the European Tour members. And so, ultimately, there was a long process that Keith, Guy Kinnings, who's the current CEO, myself went through with the various different options that got taken to the board. And interestingly, again, this goes back to the governance thing. The board said, and I don't think I'm betraying any confidence here because this is all played out in the really good book, Live and Let Die. The board said if we were a portfolio company and we had 8 goes at this, we would have probably done the disruptive thing. But because we're a members organisation, we're obviously risk averse, and this is our members' livelihood, we can't take a higher risk approach here.
That's a massive problem that I actually see quite often in sport, and it's easy to critique them, but also you have to appreciate that everyone's human, and there's generally an aversion to risk. But sport is often compromised by doing that thing that is easier, more consistent, and a little bit safer, but may not deliver quite the same level. When we see now this situation in a global game of golf, and we have Live, a massive disruptor in it, why do you think that came in the way it did? Is it simple to just say this is just an increased financial opportunity, or did it offer something else that wasn't being given?
Well, I think the reticence why people couldn't get excited about it was actually called PGL first, Premier Golf League, and then it was backed by Rain Capital, and then it went on to become Live, and then the PIF, the Saudi Public Investment Fund, became more prominent as financial suitors. People within, I think, the PGA Tour, but certainly within the European Tour, the big thing they thought was the players won't go, and they said the players are on a great thing here, like earnings are going up. I think this. I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but indicatively it's about right. In 2017, the 130th ranked player on the European Tour earned about 400k. So like you've got lots of players earning a good wage, and typically in golf you will double whatever you earn in prize fund and sponsorship. So if you're Rory McIlroy and you earn 5 million in prize fund, you typically get 5 million in sponsorship. If you earn 100 grand of prize fund, you probably get 100 grand of sponsorship. So like people are earning good salaries, and we always used to think about earning opportunities. Earning opportunities were going up, and so people thought, well, the players won't risk this. And the first person to sort of put their head above the parapet was Phil Mickelson, and there was, in economic terms, irrational amounts of money that were getting put to them to be the people who would put their head above the parapet, because there's a huge risk portfolio to that.
It's like no one will ever do it until you get offered 9 figures to do. I mean, you're like, well, I didn't count that into my.
Exactly.
No one's ever going to do it.
And I like it comes out a lot well in the Full Swing documentary. Like, not only are you getting generational wealth, but you're also only having to play X times a year versus 28 times a year.
I love that bit from Dustin Johnson. It was that exact moment where he said, you know, if you criticize me all you want, but if someone offered you the chance to play more, sorry, to be paid more and play less, so I get to spend more time with my family doing the things I want, I promise you're not going to be able to resist that. And you're like, fair enough.
Yeah, it's a tough life being a professional golfer. It's a great life, but it's a tough life being a professional sportsman. Like, they're away, they're traveling so much, particularly like maybe the PGA Tour guys have got it slightly better because they're all within the US. But like the European Tour rank and file, they are going down to South Africa one week, and they're going over to Kenya, and like there's events everywhere. Like you're not seeing your family a lot, and you've got lots of on costs. Like you get to that stage, and there's huge amounts of money, and there's potentially a different lifestyle. So people were very resistant that the players would go, but then the players started to go, and there's obviously the upfront friction costs, which PIF had the vision balance sheet to be able to absorb in terms of paying John Ram 250 million and paying Dustin 150 million, and whatever those numbers were. But the product's the right product. And that's why I sort of was always probably more on the Firebrand side of things, because you know that in 5-10 years time, it's not sustainable to have 250 72 stroke play men's professional games. You need to have the top players playing against each more often, and the economic model will ultimately come from the product and the competition structure.
So what happens next? How do you see this playing out? There's so much that goes on around it all. We talk about mergers, talk about both have their great parts, but both struggle in areas. What does this actually look like as we move forward? Yeah,
I haven't been close to it for the last 5 years, and Guy is a great leader of the European Tour. Jay is an incredible leader of the PGA Tour. I'm sure they have a master plan for how this is all going to play out. I would be very surprised if there is not one single global golf calendar at some point in the next 2 or 3 years. I think the PGA Tour is probably it would probably benefit from having a team competition like an IPL. I mean, we always used, when we were doing the initial views of how this model could look like as an integrated model, we always thought that actually after the FedEx, you could have an 8-12 week IPL type competition where you had the team format that sat there. It's like, it doesn't conflict with any of the majors. It's outside of the core times of the PGA Tour. It would obviously mean that the PGA Tour schedule would have to be rationalised. But the PGA Tour have started to do that already by these elevated events anyway.
Yeah.
Like the top players are playing on those, I don't know if it's 10 or 12 elevated events. So I think you're probably going to get to a place, goes back to the discussion we were having earlier, tennis is facing the same thing. Maybe football will in the future. I think you're going to get to a place where you've got a single ecosystem and a single commissioner and everything comes back together. There's just obviously big sums involved that need to be worked through first.
I think any sport where I look at it as the athlete is an independent contractor, if you want, is really vulnerable to this type of disruption.
Yeah.
Because you can go to the athlete and you can do the deals. You don't have to go through the systems in the same way that you do if you're trying to change a whole governance structure of a Premier League.
Yeah.
You look at tennis, that's ripe for it.
Yeah.
Athletics and anything similar, it's ripe for it. Golf was ripe for it. It'll be really interesting to see what happens here, because I think it will probably, as you say, start to shape how these breakaway leagues are then brought back in. Live, and the format may be great, but it's got a distribution issue.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know where to go to watch it necessarily. So, that is a problem. If I've got a great product, but no one can engage properly with it.
And I'm not actually sure the Live Golf product is the right. So I think the team format is good. I think the amount of golf they play is good. I'm still not necessarily solved on 54 holes versus 72 holes, but that's
the purest in us, isn't it?
That is a different debate. I mean, I don't think I've been as emotionally involved in any sports experience over the last 10 years as I was as Rory on Sunday a couple of weeks ago. Like, there's just that level of drama.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It's just like, that is what we all are so fortunate to work in the sports industry for, that we get to see some of that stuff up close, because it was just magical.
I'd love, if you were up for it, to just ask a few quick fire questions, get your perspective on a few. First one I'd love to do is, what's in your eyes been the most effective technology implementation in the sports that we've talked through?
I think I would go back to goal line technology, because I think you nailed it when you say it's totally binary. It's either in or it's out. There's no stoppage to the game, and it adds value. And so it's I think our ambition is always to not only make the game fairer, but make the game more entertaining as well. And I think that ticks both of those boxes.
What sport do you think needs a shake-up?
The one sport we're really excited about having a role at the moment is boxing. So I don't know if you've come across Striker, yes. So did you go to the recent London
I was
exhibition?
meant to, but it was the same night as the Baller League launch.
Yes, I did hear about that.
And I was a baller. But fantastic. I'm a big fan.
We provide the skeletal tracking and the technology that automates the scoring for boxing for Striker. So it was actually like great to see it brought to life.
And explain just what it does.
So historically, obviously, boxing has been scoring and officiating has been a relatively black box. You've got three people who are sitting ringside and looking to score, and then you don't get any feedback from that until the end, where they say 116, 112 won by unanimous decision. And so what we're effectively doing now in partnership with Striker is we're tracking every punch that gets thrown. And so we're able to know the velocity with which the punch was thrown, and where it hit on the opponent's body, whether it was on the jaw, on the side of the face, on the head, in the ribs, etc. And then you can allocate different points for that based on the accuracy and the power of the punch. And so you've got a live by live leaderboard of the scoring. And so it becomes much more transparent and much more overt and much more visible. Now, there's obviously fan engagement opportunities, there's betting opportunities, there's all that type of good stuff. But also it just makes the transparency around the sport much better.
What's the hardest part of your job?
Like, we're owned by a big corporate, and there's so many opportunities in sports at the moment. And I would love to be maybe running a little bit quicker around some of the stuff we're doing. We're looking to do another acquisition at the moment. I mean, Sony have been incredible with me and with us. Like, since I came in, they talked about wanting to invest in sport. And I've wanted to do 2 acquisitions, and they've supported me on both of those. I want to do another acquisition, and they're supporting me on that. But it's not the quickest moving organization. I mean, you see some others in the sports industry, particularly PE backed, and they seem to be acquiring and integrating companies every day. I'm not sure that is necessarily the right model either. But we have to be very considered and thoughtful. It takes a while to get things going.
I guess it's one thing investing and having them as part of a portfolio when you're a passive investor. It's another thing acquiring and then actually owning and running that business to make sure it fits in your model. That's where it's much harder for you than it is just as an investor.
Absolutely. And we're not a portfolio. We're not a sports investor. We want to create a long-term shareholder value by having a big sports company. And like the business is great. Like I've been there 4 years. We've doubled revenue. We've got significant profit growth. We've got really healthy margins. So the business is in really good shape. And so we've got support from Japan. I suppose the other thing that we would really like to do at some point in the future is a more transformative deal. Like we've done a couple of acquisitions so far, relatively modest in Sony terms. But as you know, in sport, it's actually quite hard to do something. Like the way Sony got to scale in music was by buying Columbia Records, and then you're immediately number 2 in the market in what is a 4 or 5 player industry. Sport is so fragmented, it's changing so quickly. We talked about potential inflection points in terms of consumption business model. Like it's very hard to actually buy at scale in that. And so you do have to be a bit more, I think, piecemeal in terms of pulling things together. And that obviously creates issues in terms of, you say, like PMI and integrating companies and all that type of stuff.
Look, there's no point working in this industry if you can't have a bit of fun at the same time. You must have had some amazing experiences. Is there one that really stands out that you've got to go to or be a part of through working in the industry that's been like, wow?
It has to. So it has to be the Ryder Cup. Ryder Cup 2018 at Golf National. It was one of the most electric atmospheres, and it's not a forced atmosphere either. It's so genuine, so authentic. And like the first tee was brilliant, but actually the moment that really stood out for me, I think it was on the Saturday, and the Golf National had like lots of natural amphitheaters there, and you just had people from the 16th green who were shouting, I think, to people on the 17th tee, and there was just like this back and forth of like 5,000 people who were just loving the action of the golf. And yeah, for me, that was really, really special.
I love it. Look, it's amazing. It must be such an incredible job. It's an incredible career that you've had today. I'm sure there's plenty more to come. Not trying to put an end to it. But thank you so much for coming in and sharing it. It's been fascinating, completely different type of things to talk about for people than we often do. So thank you for the transparency and the level of information that you shared. It's been brilliant.
Thank you very much. Thanks.